Hello, welcome back. As you can see, I've assembled the gun mounting, the mortar mounting and the mortar itself. There's also the loading tray and a couple of shells to go with it. All that needs to be done now is for it to be weathered and painted first, obviously, and then weathered. Looking at the videos of this mortar on YouTube and the German Tank Museum, where they've got apparently the only surviving one, which isn't this gun. They made 7 of them. This was the first one. How they made the first one and the second one. The other 5 were slightly different. They were different mounting, different hull for the gun, and lots of quite different bits on it. So I've tried to keep this one as much as I possibly can do to the original, the first one that was built. However, I waffle on. So where we're up to is, as I say, I've built the mounting and the mortar itself. I'll just move some of this stuff out of the way. Put that down there so we can see what we're doing. The shells, at 1 to 35, which is obviously the scale of this, that shell would come out at 9 feet tall, which is an enormous thing. And apparently they weighed 2.5 tons. You wouldn't want to go off accidentally, would you? That's a large shell and a standard shell apparently. The gun, the mortar itself, and put together really quite easily. There's a couple of little bits that I'll mention as I go along. The recoil system works perfectly well on it, and it's going to be a little bit awkward to paint, but I can't put it all together yet before I've painted it, because most of it wouldn't get painted. Again, the mounting carriage for it, I've assembled, I've put it all together, and the gun simply sits in on those 2 bearings. Those 2 bearings, I haven't glued them on. I've stuck them on with a little bit of double-sided tape on each side. Most of it went together really very easily. There's no real problems with it. Some quite delicate bits, these wheels are quite delicate, and they would be used to alter the elevation of the gun itself. There are a lot of little fiddly steering type gears here that come into a gearbox, and on this end as well, and they again would be to alter the elevation of the gun. There's a couple of handles, one on each end of this, that I haven't put on yet because they would just get broken off while I was painting it. So that's where we're up to on that. We've got a little frame here that carries the loading sledge. It sits on there and it slides in and out to carry the shells. The shell would sit on top of there, and again that all needs to be painted separately, otherwise it will show bits of yellow plastic all over the place. Likewise with this mounting, and I'll just show you where that mounting goes. As I say, I've looked at many reference photographs of this on the internet and on various tank museums, and the instructions don't actually tell you where to fit this. They just say to sit it on this scaffolding here. Well, you know, there's quite a lot of places you could put it. I expected when it was built that it would land on some of this superstructure that they've built on the inside, that they supplied to build on the inside, but it doesn't. It simply doesn't sit on there. It doesn't reach down far enough to. According to the Tank Museum, this here, let me get my pointer. Oops. The edge of this here, oops, I've got it on the wrong way round. Right, now we're cooking on gas. This edge here sits just a fraction off the edge of the support frame underneath it, and then this sledge goes on the top there. It sits on the top. Now that's where I'm going to glue it onto. I'm going to fix it onto that area. But as you can see, if you did that before you painted it, you're going to have an awful job painting down inside these the sides of it, because it moves from side to side. It's not a tight fit in there at all. So that's why it's all separate and all be painted separate. Put that over there. Couple of little bits. This frame, this mounting frame for the slide, the loading slide, sits into, can you see them there? Yeah, you can see them there. Two little holes here on the back of the mounting frame, and it sits, the legs sit in that. In real life, there are pins that go through there and hold it in place. On the kit, however, those two are solid. So what I've had to do, I don't know if you can see that on the video, yeah, you can just about. I've drilled two little holes right the way through those, and I will cut a couple of pieces of 1mm steel or copper wire and just feed them through there and super glue them into place, and that will hold that into place like that, which is what I want when it's assembled. Most of this assembly, no problem at all. Just go through the instructions with you. The gun itself, the mortar itself, starts on page 16, and straight away you come across the fact that it's got two different barrels. It has a long barrel, which was a 540mm bore, tells you down the bottom here, and a 600mm mortar, which was the original. They changed to this 540 one because the range was quite short on this one. It was about 2.5 miles apparently, and that left them in easy range of whoever they were firing at. So if they opened fire, they would immediately receive fire from whoever they were shooting at. So they developed this longer barrel, which was fitted to some of these mortars, and it had a longer range. So that's that bit. I've highlighted it in amber because I'm not using that one, and highlighted it in amber wherever it turns up. That way I'm not going to get confused and glue the wrong parts on. The rest of the assembly here, going onto section 17, really very easy. It's basically making boxes and tubes. These springs here are for the recoil system, and the instructions would imply that you put it all together, then glue the box together, and then fit that box into the barrel. If however you do that, these two pins sit on those two little retaining plates there, and if you glue it all together so that they're encased in your plastic box here like this, and then whilst you're trying to put it into here, you knock one of those out of place here, you're going to have to chisel the top off in order to put it right. So what I did personally was I assembled all the bottom half of it and just simply left this piece off, R1. When I'd got it fixed to the breech here of the gun and the barrel, then, and I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, put the top on, and that worked fine. All of this here goes together really quite easily. This piece of PE here, PEB3, was quite difficult because it's such a delicate piece of PE. I think you can see it there. It just runs around the edge here. And what you've got to do is these barrels would be made in one piece. They wouldn't be welded together like this, and it slides in and out on the recoil system. So what you've got to do is get your barrels sorted so that you've got the seam. It's disappeared basically. It's gone. Yeah. When you painted it, you won't see the filler at all. And then what I had to do was then super glue that piece of PE down, and ever so carefully sand it all the way round so that it came nice and flush with the barrel. And also you've got to sand on the inside of it because the barrel slides in and out of it. Yeah, and that of course is for the recoil system. When the gun fires, that would fire backwards and then back into there. I'm sure you already knew that, but hey, just in case. The breech for the loader, and they would put the shell in through here using the slide. It would be pushed into the barrel right inside there. Then this piece would sit, when I put it in the right way round, would come across there so that it didn't fire backwards, which wouldn't do you any good at all. And that's a big old lump of steel there that's on there. So that obviously will be painted a different colour. That'll be painted a steel colour. The top on this piece here, it comes in two modes, and you can either fit it on the top for a firing mode, or it would be left off for a transporting mode. The reason for that is the height of it, it probably wouldn't go under the bridges. So they've designed it so that can be lifted off. There is a small error on it. When I put the thing together, it's got the recoil springs in it as well, of course, and when I put the thing together I thought, how on earth did he lift that off? So I went back to the German Tank Museum, and these lugs here on the model, they're moulded in with this piece of kit, and they're just like bolts. There's no flange on them at all. In real life they have a flange on them, and that flange, you would get a crane hook, something similar to this, a fully rounded hook that would go over. There'd be four of them obviously, and it would hook onto there, yeah, on there, and also on the other side, and that way you could really quite quickly clip them on and lift this thing off, and away it would go to wherever you wanted. I'm sure when the train that pulls this thing would have several support wagons and to carry stuff. When it's in a transport mode, the loading sledge is taken off as well. There's quite a lot of bits taken off it, and they would obviously go into railway wagons separately. Other than that, that's quite easy, the gun. There wasn't a lot to do on it. So that's that page there. Then it was on to section 18. This is the configuration for the 540mm gun. As I say, we're not doing that. And this piece here is a sledge. Is this sledge for the 540mm gun. So again, we're not using that. This only goes on for the 540. The rest of it here, really quite easy to put together. A little bit of PE to do there. Nothing difficult at all. This is the piece that I've just mentioned that that sits on top of the gun here, and again, nothing really difficult to put together there. Moving on, the loading carriage that I've just shown you, the slide that actually slides in, a little bit fiddly to build, but nothing too dramatic. This is the one that I'm not doing, again for the 540mm gun. Then it goes on to the mounting frame, which is really quite simple. It's basically building the boxes up, which is this here. You know, there's lots of stuff to go onto it, but it's really quite easy. One thing I would say is that this section here, can you see that? Yeah, of course you can. Which is T11 on both sides and a cog in the middle. There's also a little steel bar that goes through them to allow that cog to turn, and it says no cement, not to put any cement on any of it. However, can you see that? Yeah, that's it in the bottom there, and the cog actually turns. But what I found is when you put the steel bar in there, it's quite a loose fit in the two side pieces, that part number T11. So once it's inside the hull of the transporter, if that pin fell out, you'd never get it back. You'd have to take the whole thing apart to get it out. So what I've done is I've put it in there, and a spot of super glue on each end of that shaft has held it in place, and it's not affected the wheel turning whatsoever. And that's about it in there. As I say, really quite simple stuff, simply sticking frames on. You might need to use a couple of clamps to hold them in place while the glue sets. Section 23, exactly the same thing, building up boxes and putting them in, joining the two side pieces together. These Q15 and 14, the little bit, some of them were a little bit warped, and you've got to hold on to them for a little while and sand the top of the frames a little bit to make them nice and level, but after that they go on quite easily. All the rest of it goes on quite easily, nothing too dramatic there at all. As you can see, it's only little bits. The shells, they go together quite easily. They need quite a lot of sanding and filling and then repolishing, and otherwise you can see the seaming, and these shells would be made out of a solid piece, so this would be one piece like a pipe rather than a piece joined together. You really wouldn't want to set that off inside your gun barrel if it had a seam down the middle, because if it split open then you'd be in real trouble then. Apparently these things weigh 2.5 tons and it can propel them for about 2.5 miles, so there's a lot of explosive in there. You really don't want it to go off in the barrel. So it looks better if you spend a bit of time on sanding them and polishing them again. Then when it's painted you won't see any of the seams at all. Or is that me being too picky? But hey ho. The two little handles that I've left off, I've left them off because I'm clumsy, and when I'm painting it I would have broken them. And I think I've already mentioned the two bearing caps, the caps on the bearing. I've assembled them, put all the little bits on them, and then put them onto the mounting frame, but I've just used a little bit of double-sided tape to glue them on, so that when it's painted and it all comes out nice and even, then I can just prise them off and then stick them back on when I've got the gun in there. The gun sits inside, and as you can see from that now, if that was sitting in the bearing, you'd be able to see all sorts of yellow plastic if it wasn't if you didn't paint them separately. So it's got to be done separately, basically. That is about it. That's about where we're up to. Just one question of you guys that might know a bit more than I do. These four things here, let's bring it a bit closer for you. These four here, one there, and one there and one there, I have no idea what they're for. At first I thought they were lights, but that's an enormous locating bracket to put a simple light on, isn't it? I have no idea what they are, and as I say, there's some hefty material underneath holding them on. If anybody knows, I'd love to know myself. If you could leave a comment in the comments box, I'd be very grateful. Other than that, I'm going to get it painted. I've painted all the same colour as the hull of the transporter, and then I'll weather it up, rust it up. Looking at the pictures of this when it was in action and the videos of this when it was in action, it was in a right old mess. It was very rusty and very, very dirty. I'm going to go somewhere in between with it, and because it's got to look good, hasn't it? And that's about it. So when I've got it painted and rusted, I shall make another video. I'll fix it into the transporter, and I'll make another video, and we'll see where we're up to then. Thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments box below, and it would be great if you would like and subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Ta-ra!